nothing as the first prescription to prevent stress, because it's something that teenagers genuinely want to do. And I like to say, imagine the best case scenario where you want to be and then backtrack how you got there. Well, signs to be aware of if habits suddenly change. Nature always helps us calm down. And what's very grounding is literally lying on the ground. One of my favorite ones is basically take one of your hands and touch your forehead. And you can't help someone when you aren't strong yourself.
Hello, and welcome back to Talking Teens Official. I'm Nural, and thank you for joining me and your listening ears. Today, I have a very special guest joining us on our podcast today, and her name is Veronika. Veronika is a kinesiologist and also a high school teacher from Vienna in Austria. Welcome, Veronika, and thank you for agreeing to come on the show and have a chat to us about stress and students. I think there's a lot of parents out there who are going to be listening very carefully right now.
Hello and welcome from me as well. And I'm really looking forward to talking to you and meeting you at least online.
Yeah, it's quite lovely. Like we've connected obviously on school and on the school network, but it's actually nice to actually have a chat in person in air quotes online about what parents can do and students can do to help maybe recognize the signs of stress in their kids. I know you've mentioned before that you're in Vienna, your high school students are coming up to their final exams soon in May. And in Australia here, ours are normally around November. October, November is when our final exams are. So that's when it's generally a pretty stressful time for a lot of kids. And it's a conversation that even I've had with a lot of kids and parents over the years too, as to what they can do to help best support their students in those stressful situations. So I'd love to hear from you the effects of what you might say to parents of students in your school, and what advice is normally given over there and what we can do about it.
Advice I always give to both students and their parents, if I see the parents of students at that age, make sure you get enough sleep. And make sure you get enough time to really relax and recharge. Because with all the stress and all the expectations that the students and the families and society and whoever else puts on them, it's very tempting to keep on studying at this course, at that course. And relaxing and free time doesn't mean going to football training or learning the instrument or whatever else, or this other so-called leisure activity, literally doing nothing. Students always love me when I advise their parents a certain amount of just phone scrolling, TV time, doing nothing as the first prescription to prevent stress, because it's something that teenagers genuinely want to do, whether or not we adults understand the significance and meaning of it.
Yes.
And yes, of course, any other input, especially in the digital world, then arouses our brain and our nervous system again. Yes, but the fact that the fear of missing out stresses us even more. And what I tend to advise is, what is the lesser of two evils? And missing out is definitely worse, especially in the experience of the young person, than whatever stress is caused by that. And by the way, your own happy wedding has been found to be the most stressful situation in a person's life, according to psychological studies worldwide. So there you go.
Yeah. And what things should parents be looking out for, do you think, in their kids, in their teenagers, if they're worried or they're concerned that they might be feeling a little bit stressed about their studies or just in general? Like, it could be friendship issues, it could be work issues, it could be anything. What are some of the signs that you think parents should be a little bit more aware of? And perhaps, maybe if you can you give any kind of tools or suggestions, do you think, as to what they could do to help?
Well, signs to be aware of if habits suddenly change.
Yeah.
So if your son, daughter used to like whatever and suddenly doesn't show interest in that anymore,
Yeah.
and not as in because they outgrow it or because the trend has faded, but either the things they were genuinely passionate about, not because everybody else was doing it, but because it was genuinely important to them,
Yeah.
especially without any issue or anything they understand why. For example, student Tom loved playing the guitar, then his guitar teacher said something he didn't want to hear. Now suddenly Tom hates playing the guitar. Well, then you know why. I don't mean things
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
But when there's no obvious or more subtle connection to why there's, or if behaviors change, and I can't really give examples because they're so unique to the person, but personal habits, you know this person by X, Y, Z, and this suddenly changes.
Yeah. So just seeing and looking out for them, those really subtle shifts, I think sometimes some of them are really good at hiding it too, aren't they? So those really subtle shifts. And I think what you said about not enjoying the things that they used to enjoy is probably the first red flag that can be raised without them actually coming out and saying to you that I'm feeling stressed or anything like that. It's just more of a slow withdrawal, do you think, that can actually happen? Do you think
Yes,
that's kind of true?
absolutely. And also if you feel they are, and these are again very tiny subtle signals, if they are kind of in slow motion mode, where you, like with a technological device, which hasn't been updated for quite some time or is hitting retirement age, when things are just a tiny little bit slower and take more effort and so on.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that I don't want to compare teenagers to technological devices, even, but I just like this image because in your technological stuff, you're so used to these instantaneous things that they train you to notice subtle differences.
Yeah.
And that's the
Yeah.
same for your teenagers. And also, if you want to communicate with them, try not to talk to them about being stressed, because it's embarrassing admitting that you can't deal with that and they want to solve that by themselves. But rather,
Yeah.
imagine you talk to your son and daughter about being stressed and they admit it. Which advice would you give them? And just give that advice, not by telling them, but for example, leave that newspaper article that might be helpful randomly on the table in the kitchen.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good idea.
To save face, or you have this, or with a dinner table conversation, you tell someone else, my colleague at work found this helpful, and you describe in detail what helped them. And of course, when
Yeah.
I give these examples, they are extremely staged. But I trust that parents will know how to naturally incorporate this into family life without it being awkward.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a really important point there too, I think, is just trusting the parents a little bit that they can, they know their kids best. Like we can sit here and give advice and talk about all these issues all we want. But at the end of the day, the parents should know their kids best. And it's kind of like, I feel that my job is to give you all these different strategies that could work, as a parent, you're going to pick the one that you think will work for your kids and your household. So it's exactly what you said, how there is, each case is individual. It's whenever someone comes out and has this umbrella fix for everything, I always put my head down and I shake my head and I go, you can't do that for everything. Every case is individual. So I really appreciate you pointing that out. So I think that's really, really important. I also want to have a chat about a little bit of, you gave the idea of maybe putting down a newspaper article on the counter or talking about someone at work. As a parent, you might just incorporate a little bit of storytelling into the situation there. Are there any others that you can think of, like maybe just going out in nature a little bit more with them? I don't know. Anything else you could maybe suggest?
Nature always helps us calm down. And what's very grounding is literally lying on the ground.
Right. Okay. Tell me more about that one.
Basically, little children instinctively, when they have a tantrum, throw themselves on the ground to have the tantrum, because that regulates them, gives them safety, because when gravity doesn't apply as much as it does when you have to stand up or sit, you feel grounded, you feel really held by Mother Earth. And this is not the spiritual or esoteric statement. This is just a biological statement, because also, again, when we think about our ancestors in the Stone Age, when they had to hide from the tiger or mammoth or whatever was chasing them, if they were lying on the ground, they were more invisible than when they were standing up, obviously.
It makes sense. Yeah.
So this is deeply ingrained in our bodies, and depending on where you are in the world and of the season that and the weather, you either do this, of course, ideally outside, but then be careful that it's not embarrassing for your teen. Because
Okay.
depending on where you are, if you have a space in nature where no one sees you, that's fine. Or having a picnic with friends and sitting in the grass and rolling in the grass is fine. Or studying in the grass. But if you tell them, well, go out and lie down in nature, if that puts them in an awkward position, you create more stress by stress relief.
Yeah. Yeah. True.
Even if they have to study, why don't take the study material outside and do it there. And talking about temperature, as a personal story, I used to have a horse just outside Vienna, and I would love to sit on the horse's field, cuddled against the horse, also in winter, when it was freezing cold. We had snow. It depends on what you wear and for how long you do it and what you do afterwards.
Yep. Wow. That's
and
that's
also
amazing.
these happy memories of children rolling down the grassy hills, which we know from idyllic children's stories, and also hopefully from personal experiences when we were younger. There's no age limit, just society pretends that you can only do this up to X of years. And again, make sure that you do this in a way that saves the teenager's face and where your teenager feels comfortable with it. Again, there's no umbrella fix for everyone, but I trust that parents will find a way of figuring out and also evoking happy childhood memories unique to your family. So, for example, if your child used to love this special tree around grandparents' garden, then go there if possible.
Yeah, that's true. It's a very calming, it'll have a very calming effect. Like, I mean, even right now while you're talking, my mind is off into the imagery of when I was a child and where I felt really grounded and where we went as a family, if you like. And all of a sudden, I'm just feeling relaxed, just thinking about lying on the sand on the beach, on the Great Ocean Road, just relaxing and the trees that are around there and things like that. So it does, even just having that kind of imagery and those memories to draw on, as long as they're happy, if you can encourage as parents to encourage their kids to even visit that place in their minds, it can be very beneficial as well if they can't physically get there, if it's too far away.
And even better when you visualize in your mind, you might not go using your example to that beach, but you might be able to go to a beach nearer and where you are. And if there used to be beach holidays and they are still physically too far away, then maybe there's a beach volleyball field somewhere which you can use at the odd hours and just pretend. And if you do this with your friends, and talking about this, I remember when I was starting university, a few university friends and I loved going to children's playgrounds in the dark when no children were there. And just basically we were standing there talking and occasionally trying a few things because we were obviously far too big for all the things physically, and it wasn't fun because we got stuck everywhere. But there's things like that. And what I'm trying to say with the story is if you do this with your friends, you have the additional benefit of this feeling safe and being included, being part of the group, which is so inviolate and intrinsic in our human condition that we would need to be part of a group in order to be safe. It gives them the good friendship experience. It forges their friendships. And it also makes it less embarrassing. Because doing that, at least recalling my teenage years, doing something like that with my parents I wouldn't be caught, I would rather be caught dead or naked in the street rather than doing something like that with my parents at that age. And maybe I was the odd one out. But if there's just one odd one out teenager who is a teenager at the moment, it's worth mentioning for the sake of this one person.
I wanted to circle back again to another topic because I actually realized that I probably didn't really ask you about it when I first introduced you, and it was the kinesiology. I'm not sure if everyone knows what that is. Are you able to quickly explain what a kinesiologist actually does, what you study, how it can work, and how it can help parents and kids as well?
Basically, kinesiology is the logic of movement, if you literally translate the meaning of the Greek word. And what it does is our body has an autonomous movement reflex. Otherwise, we wouldn't be alive, like breathing, heartbeat, our blood circles, and all these things. And when we are stressed by whatever, be it physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, in whichever way, we respond. Our body, as in our system, responds to prioritize survival, because those our ancestors whose nervous systems didn't immediately prioritize surviving functions didn't survive Stone Age and therefore couldn't reproduce, and therefore they aren't among us anymore, as I like saying. And as helpful as this was to survive to the present day, in the 21st century environment, the fight, flight, freeze or fawn responses, which were extremely helpful and actually life-saving in the period of the Stone Age, aren't really that helpful in our society today. And that in kinesiology, we call this the stress lock. When our system gets into stress lock and the younger parts of our brain, like our cognitive thinking abilities, are reduced. And therefore we act as irrationally as we do when we are under stress. And because when there's too much cortisol, that's one of the main hormones that are produced by stress, this is like no, poison is too strong a word, but it's harmful for our bodies. And then this again causes stress because the body needs to do something with it. And also adrenaline. And the problem is when we are stressed, the adrenaline is produced for us to be prepared to react to it. But then when there's the relief, our systems often have forgotten because or unlearned due to our lifestyles to get rid of that extra adrenaline, which is again stored in the body. Then kinesiology, through the muscle testing, which is done, there are 42 muscle tests, which correspond to the 14 meridians, so the energy flow systems in our body, tells the kinesiologist where is the stress located, and more importantly, what the body needs or the system needs to get out of the stress lock back into full functioning mode. And again, there's no umbrella fix for everybody because every stress situation is different. Yet there are some tools and techniques which universally work for everybody in every situation. I call this the kinesiological version of first aid in medicine. Because first aid, the classic medical first aid things you do can be and are life-saving, can be learned by anyone, can be applied by literally anyone, and yet it needs something after that. And of course, there are first aid things like calming a person who is in shock so that they don't hurt themselves, or if a person has a seizure, and making sure that they don't hurt themselves while they are having it. And after that, this issue is solved. And likewise, in kinesiology, sometimes these, what I call kinesiological first aid tools, are sufficient by themselves. And depending on what the source is, it needs some more individual way, which we as kinesiologists do then as a profession.
Well, I wasn't aware of that there was a couple of techniques. Can you give us one of those first aid kinesiologist techniques?
One of my favorite ones is basically take one of your hands and touch your forehead gently.
Yeah, like this. Yeah.
And because that means that that the blood comes back into the forehead, into the front of your head, where your cognitive brain parts are, and you would do this instinctively. When you get bad news and when you're stressed, you say, "Oh my God!" And we have just in our unnatural environment, we have unlearned these things. And when you do this, be careful that you don't really grasp your head, but really gently, because you apply this to the so-called neurovascular points, which respond to your blood system, and they are very tiny, gentle beings, as I call them, and they want you to be nice and gentle, as if you were talking to fairies or butterfly wings. Because if you press them too hard, you have the opposite effect, which you don't want. You don't want to stress your system more.
So we just need to do it gently rather than...
Put your hand on your forehead. You can also do this with both hands. Then you take the tips of your index finger and your middle finger. If you do this in front of a desk or table, it's more comfortable because then you have rest your elbows on the surface, slightly lean forward and touch your forehead with your fingers. When you do this, make sure that you consciously lower your shoulders, because in stress, we tend to protect our neck.
Yeah.
As you nicely demonstrate now. Imagine your ears and your shoulders are like two opposing football teams. Fans need to be separated, at least in Austrian football stadiums. And that's one thing that always works. And you can do this in literally any social situation. And you can also do this to another person, because when you gently interfere and balance with somebody else's energetic system, you have this at the advantage of co-regulation, because then your relaxed nervous system helps the other nervous system. Well, I'm in a group, and just by that I'm safe.
That's really important. I think as a parent and as a teacher as well, then I think we can kind of pick up on those little signs a little bit with kids, and especially with their friends. One of the things I always say to my kids is, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. And if you have friends who you can't co-regulate in a positive way with, it's going to come through. And it's going to come through in you and your behavior and your results and your thoughts and your feelings and everything there as well. So I think you talking about that from a kinesiology point of view, I think it is really, really valuable to have more scientific backing behind some of those sayings, I suppose. Yeah.
Always your nervous system will immediately pick up on the vibes of others. And again, coming back to the parents, the only umbrella strategy advice I happily give to parents is the more relaxed you are, the better for your child. For several reasons, because they learn from your example.
Yeah, I think
even
that
if
is
they
really
are
important.
in phases where everything the parent does is wrong just because the parent does it, they will still learn from that. And you can't help someone when you aren't strong yourself.
Correct.
This
Yeah.
basic airplane advice, put your mask on first before you help others in an emergency, applies here as well. And whatever helps you as parents to relax. And also, we are so trained, unfortunately, in imagining the worst case scenarios. Therefore,
Yes.
I like to flip the coin and say, imagine the what if best case scenario. Because like when you teach a teen how to drive, the inexperienced driver will stare at the lamppost they're trying not to crash into.
Yes.
You will
Yeah.
tell them, look where you want to go, not where you don't want to go.
Correct. Yeah.
And the same applies for life. We worry and we tell ourselves, we imagine these horror scenarios because then we can prepare for how to solve it.
Yeah.
And I like to say, imagine the best case scenario where you want to be and then backtrack how you got there. Because then you focus not on what you want to avoid, but you focus on what you can do.
Yeah.
With the double effect that your brain deletes the no. Don't think of the pink elephant.
Correct. And it's right over there, by the way.
Yeah, and therefore, if you imagine the best case scenario and then backtrack to how did I get there? What did I do? And if your first answer is, well, I was lucky because I got the exam questions I was best prepared for. Of course, that's beyond your influence, but then ask yourselves, what are these questions? Not necessarily in what's the content, but why is, let's say, the origin of the history of the Christmas tree is an easy exam question for history. Why is that so easy? What makes me remember that more easily? Maybe I can also apply this to the history of the apple tree. And I'm consciously using these absurd images, which I'm known for, the so-called Veronika stories, because they are so absurd and funny that they stick.
Yeah. That's good.
And use this also as a study technique. And when you study, involve your entire body.
All your senses.
All your senses. Or, for example, when I was studying English, I had to learn 3 adjectives for each phoneme of the English alphabet. This was something about how these phonemes are produced by the vocal cords. I have absolutely no recollection of that whatsoever. And to me, this was a completely meaningless table, but we needed to produce this. So I had a tapping rhythm for each of these adjectives. And so and I can't copy a rhythm. I still failed the primary school entrance test for just clapping and repeating the rhythm you just heard. I still failed it as hard as I tried.
Yeah, me too.
And it doesn't matter because in whatever weird rhythm I had there, I've had a code for each of these adjectives, and then each phoneme was like a song. And I'm just sharing this random example that encourage your team to be creative. They are really into song X, then use that as a bridge. And again, there's no umbrella fix, but trust your team's creativity. Have them do it with their peers who also need to learn this. Because if you turn this into a fun experience, or as fun as learning can be,
it'll stick. There's a lot of really good tips. I think you've given us here tonight on this podcast. We've talked about stresses in the body. We've talked about how to remember things. We've talked about the differences between cultures, between ours and yours. Is there anything you wanted to talk about that I haven't asked you about, or anything you think might be beneficial that you wanted to mention that we haven't got there yet?
I think what another umbrella fix that comes to my mind is water. Drinking a sufficient amount of water. And I don't know the quality of tap water in the areas you live in, but either tap water,
best in the world.
then even better than
second to you.
Tap water, just as it is. And if it's unsafe to drink in the region where you are, then still mineral water and loads of it. And any other drink, the amount you drink has to be supplemented by tap water. So, for example, 1 cup of coffee, you need an additional cup the equal size of tap water. And also, when you shower, when you take a bath, or whenever you physically clean yourself or wash your hands, imagine and really visualize how you wash your stress away in the process. When you walk from A to B, you imagine shaking off the stress like a dog shakes itself after it got wet. And with more or less physical display, depending on where you are. And many teenagers do some kind of sports, and use your sports or your workout as to let go of the stress. And especially when you have these repetitive moves in any athletic training, which are boring by themselves. For example, you have to punch the air X times, or you have to practice this kick or whatever. You kick what stresses you, and imagine your stress. And this might sound a bit ridiculous, but that's exactly why I use it. Imagine the stress is a creature, and ask the strange creature, demand it to manifest itself, like the famous ghost in the lamp of Aladdin. And have that stress show up, or this worry show up as a creature, and sit it down and and ask it to present its case, like in court. And then you listen, because often things which stress us, or limiting beliefs that we have, are a very clumsy way of expressing something that is actually useful for us, or used to be useful for us. And the problem is that quite often we still carry beliefs which were useful in either one particular situation or in times we've long outgrown, but we aren't aware of them, and they have their merry party inside us, somewhere in the back. And when all the other things, when we're stressed and we can't, and they are tired, then they have their moment. This is when they finally slip up. And if you
100%.
have them, then if you have them really sit down and talk to them, and if you think this is weird when you listen, just try. And worst case, you have a good laugh, which is also stress relief,
Yeah.
by the way.
Yeah. I think that's a really good technique that you've given there to be able to try. I actually haven't heard that one before. So you know what? I'm going to try it myself too, and I'll let you know because I think we're all guilty of it, parents and kids, of having these limiting beliefs about what we can and what we can't do, or what we can and we can't achieve. And I think by actually questioning those beliefs, like, what do you want? Why are you here? I think you'll find that those answers are probably just going to fall silent. Like, I don't know, you put me here, type thing. So it'd be very interesting.
And listening to you, that might also work. But the way I intended it was, you have, for example, I'm sharing a personal story. When I was 13, 14, 12 to 15, roughly, my dad used to give me hours and hours of lectures how I was going to fail school because I didn't study as a straight A student, by the way. And I would find out later, and much later, I realized, I was told, that my dad had almost failed high school himself because he hadn't studied properly in the first years because nobody looked after his school achievements. He was just running wild. And therefore and since his school days and my school days, the system had changed completely, also expectations. And he was still measuring my school life against his experience. And therefore, what he wanted was, he had the best intentions he wanted to protect me from having to find out far too late.
Yeah.
And this is,
Yeah.
but the way he did it was it really the best way he could. And by no means, I want to accuse him, and we've sorted this out a long time ago. But in the moment, and that's why that's just a vivid example of how these things work. And I literally recommend, get some color pencils, some colors, whatever, and really have this show up with the hands that and really create the image with the hand that you normally don't write with. And then just let this creature talk, give it a voice, like in role plays.
Yeah.
And not as in accusing it, why are you here? Who put you here? But with genuine interest, which message do you bring? Because they always have a good intention at some core, however muddled up.
Yeah.
It is, like I was trying to explain with that example from my dad.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, that's very good. Is there anything else you wanted to mention before we wrap this up? It's getting a bit late where I am. I don't know, middle of the day where you are.
At the moment, if these things you heard resonate with you, I'd be more than happy to give you more details, more ideas, answer your questions on whatever's interesting and relevant.
And how can someone get in contact with you if they were wanting to, someone's watching and they're listening and they want to get in contact with you? How would they do that?
I have a website, and I'm on LinkedIn and on the school platform.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you for giving up your time to have a chat and your expertise. I really appreciate it. Until next time, thank you very much. Veronika, thank you for coming here, and I'm sure we'll have you on again at some point in the future.